Texas Panhandle, late spring, 1879. The wind carried the scent of mesquite and dust as Elijah Archer rode into the dying light, the sky behind him bruised with purples and reds. The land stretched wide and bare around him, silent but for the steady beat of his horse's hooves. He was headed nowhere in particular, just away. That changed when he crested a rise and saw a woman struggling to lift a wooden beam off a crumpled wagon wheel. Her skirts were torn at the hem, her hands dirt-smeared. Two children stood nearby, a boy and a girl, hardly older than 7, watching her with wide, anxious eyes. He dismounted before he could think twice. "You need help?" he called out, voice steady. The woman looked up, strands of dark hair stuck to her cheek. Her eyes locked on him, guarded and worn. "I do not take charity," she said, straightening. "I am not offering charity," he said. "Just 2 hands and a strong back." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "If you can lift it, I will not stop you." Elijah glanced at the children. The boy clutched a stick like a sword. The girl held the hem of her mother's skirt. He crouched low, gripped the beam, and lifted. It groaned, then gave way. The wheel rolled free. "Thank you," the woman said, brushing her hands against her dress. "I am Selah Grant." "These are my children, Zadie and Zeke," Elijah nodded. "Elijah Archer, you passing through?" "I go where I am needed," he said. "Lately that has not been many places." Selah studied him. "Well, you were needed here." The wagon was a mess. One wheel cracked, the axle splintered. Elijah squatted beside it and ran his hand along the brake. "You will not get far like this." "I know," she said quietly. "I was heading for Mobity, thought maybe they would take me in at the mission there, but the wheels snapped 3 miles back. I tried to fix it myself." He looked at her, really looked, the lines of exhaustion around her mouth, the way her shoulders sagged when she thought he was not looking. She had been alone for a long time. "Where is their father?" he asked gently. Selah's mouth tightened. "Gone." "He left before Zeke could walk, never came back." Elijah nodded once. "I can patch this wheel enough to get you to town, but you will need a new one. I have no money. I am not asking for any." Selah's eyes flicked to his. "People do not do things for nothing. I do." She said nothing to that. He worked through the evening light, hands moving steady over the wood. Zeke knelt beside him, handing him nails. Zadie sat beside her mother, drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. By the time the stars blinked awake, Elijah had the wheel patched and the wagon upright. "You should not ride in the dark," he said, standing. "We will sleep here," Selah said. "We have blankets." "I have a fire," Elijah said, "and coffee." She hesitated. "You can sit just long enough to warm the children," he added. "Nothing more." She nodded once. "All right." They sat near the fire, the children curled together beneath a blanket, Selah's hands wrapped around a tin cup, her eyes watching the flames. "You move around a lot?" she asked. "Some," he said. "Worked cattle drives mostly, helped a few towns after storms. There is always someone needing help." "And no one waiting for you?" "No," Elijah said. She nodded slowly. "Makes it easier to leave." "Not always." They sat in silence for a time. Selah's voice was quiet when she finally spoke again. "No one ever stays." Elijah turned his head toward her, firelight flickering in his eyes. "Then I will be the first," he said, "and the last." She looked at him like she did not believe it, like no one had ever said that to her before. And maybe no one had. The next morning he walked beside the wagon as they rolled toward Mobity. The ride was slow, the wheel groaning with every dip, but it held. He caught Selah watching him more than once, not just with wariness anymore, with something else, something softer. At the edge of town, they stopped near a livery. Elijah motioned to the tired horse pulling the wagon. "You leave her here. She needs rest. I will find a new wheel." Selah stepped down, brushing her palms on her skirt. "You have already done more than enough." "It is not enough," he said simply, and turned toward the blacksmith's. By midday, he had bartered for a wheel and helped mount it. Selah watched him the whole time, her children clutching her hands. When the wagon stood strong again, Elijah looked at her. "You could stay in Mobity," he said, "but you do not want to." Selah's lips parted. "What makes you say that? You keep looking at the road." She looked down. He stepped closer. "I know a place south, empty land but good. There is a river, trees. I have a small house there. I built it last year. I was going to sell it, but I never could." Selah's eyes lifted. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I would like you to come there," Elijah said. You, the children, all of you, you do not know me. I know you are strong. You raised those children on your own. You fought to keep going, and you did not once ask for help. Selah's throat bobbed. I am not asking for forever, he said. Just a little while until you decide what you want. She looked at her children, at the wagon, then at him. All right, she said. That night they camped just outside of town, the stars shining bright overhead. Zeke fell asleep against Elijah's side, and Elijah did not move, just looked across the fire at Selah. Thank you, she said softly. He shook his head. You do not owe me anything? I know, she said. That is why I am thanking you. She smiled then. A small thing, but it stayed in his chest the rest of the night, and when he lay down beside the fire, he knew he was not going anywhere. They left Mobity behind before dawn, wagon wheels creaking steady over dry earth. The children dozed in the back, tucked under a quilt Elijah had traded for on the way out of town. Selah held the reins, her hands steady, her jaw set against the wind. Elijah rode beside her, his horse keeping pace without need of reins. The path south was quiet. Nothing but mesquite scrub, low grass, and the occasional coyote darting from shadow to shadow. They passed no riders, no wagons, only the wind and the sound of leather shifting in the saddle. You built it alone? Selah asked without turning. Elijah nodded once. Cut the stone from the bluff myself, hauled every beam in from 100 miles west. Took me nearly a year. Why? I needed to make something that would outlast me. She glanced sideways. And did it, still standing, he said. They traveled in silence for a long while before Selah spoke again. Zeke talks about you like he's known you a long time. I don't mind. You should. He'll come to expect you. I don't break easy, Elijah said. Not from people. Selah's mouth pressed into a line, but she didn't speak again. By midday, they stopped near the edge of a dry creek. Elijah unhitched the horse while Selah pulled bread and dried peaches from a sack. The children ate first. Elijah waited, watching the sky shift pale around the edges. As she handed him a piece of bread, Selah met his eyes. You always this quiet? No, he said. Only when I'm listening. To what? He nodded toward the land. Everything it remembers. Selah looked out over the brush, the brittle trees twisted from a hard winter. I don't think the land remembers me. It will. Later that day, the hills rolled up around them, not steep, but enough to slow the wagon. Elijah dismounted and walked beside it, hand against the frame to keep balance. Did it ever get lonely? Selah asked. I didn't mind the quiet. That's not what I asked. Elijah looked up toward the ridge ahead. Some nights it was hard, he said, but I kept a fire going. That helped. Selah considered him. You don't talk about your people. Nothing much to say. You got family. Had a brother, he said. Died in Kansas, fever took him fast. She didn't press. She just nodded and looked back down the trail. They made camp near the river that night, 10 miles from the house Elijah had spoken of. The stars came out sharp and bright. Zadie fell asleep curled near Selah's lap. Zeke dragged a stick through the sand, chasing imaginary beasts. Elijah sat on a flat stone, sharpening a tool by firelight. You ever think about leaving Texas? Selah asked. Once, he said. Thought about Montana, but I came back. Why? He looked across the flames at her. Didn't feel right to leave something unfinished. Selah's brow furrowed. What was unfinished? Elijah tapped the blade against the stone. I don't know yet. She pulled her shawl closer. I never planned to come this far west. I was raised in Arkansas, thought I'd die there. You want to go back? No, she said. There's nothing there for me now. He nodded, slow and thoughtful. Do you believe in second lives? She asked. No, Elijah said, but I believe in second chances. Selah didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was soft. I'm not sure I know what to do with one. You don't have to know yet, Elijah said. You just have to take it. Zeke lay down not far from the fire, one hand still clutching his stick. Selah shifted so his head rested against her knee. She didn't speak again that night, but she didn't look away from Elijah either. In the morning, they reached the land. It unfolded gradually, thick grass bending in the breeze, willows along the river's edge, a bluff to the west with stone the color of old bone. The house stood near the tree line, built low and wide from stacked limestone, its roof timbered with cedar. A small corral sat empty to one side, waiting. Selah stopped the wagon and climbed down, staring at the structure. "You built this?" she asked. "I did. It's solid." "It'll hold," Elijah said. The children spilled from the wagon. Zadie ran to the porch step. Zeke followed, calling to her. Elijah didn't move. He waited. Selah walked to the door and touched the frame. Her shoulders eased a fraction. "I can clean it," she said. "I already did." She looked at him then, really looked. "I came here not knowing where I'd land," she said. "I still don't know how to trust a place." "You don't have to," Elijah said. "Just trust yourself." Selah stood in the doorway, the morning wind tugging at her sleeves. Then she turned and called to her children. "Come on," she said. "Let's go see our new home." Elijah watched her step inside, her back straight, her voice calm. He followed after, slow and quiet, and shut the door behind them. A week passed. Then another. The land wore spring like a quiet oath green pushing up through the dry earth, cottonwoods unfurling soft leaves near the riverbank. Elijah spent the early mornings splitting cedar, stacking the wood in a clean line along the southern wall. Selah washed clothes down by the creek with Zadie beside her, sleeves rolled past her elbows, hair tied back with twine. Zeke followed Elijah more often than not, mimicking the way he coiled rope, asking questions about fence lines and wild tracks. Inside the house, Selah moved with careful purpose. She arranged the kitchen shelf by size and use, stitched new curtains from old flour sacks, and scrubbed the wooden floors clear of dust with a rag and her own spit-polished determination. She didn't ask permission. Elijah never offered any. One evening, after the children had fallen asleep against each other on a mat by the hearth, Selah stepped outside and found Elijah sitting on the porch steps. His hat rested beside him. His hair was damp from washing, curls still clinging to his neck. He was carving something small in his hands, a strip of mesquite shaved into a thin loop. She sat without asking. "That for anything?" she asked, nodding toward the carving. "Trying to keep my hands still," he said. "I don't always have work for them come sundown. You ever think about leaving this place?" "Sometimes," he said. "Then I remember I built it to stay put." She looked out over the yard, the fence line barely visible in the dark. "I keep waiting for the edge to wear off." "What edge?" "The one that says this don't belong to me, that I'm just borrowing it until someone comes and says otherwise." "No one's coming," Elijah said. "Not for this." She drew her knees up, folding her skirt beneath her. "I've never lived anywhere that didn't feel temporary. Even when I tried to settle, something always changed. A man left. A neighbor burned down their field and took mine with it. The bank came knocking. Each time I thought I had a grip on it, it slid away." "You got a grip now," Elijah said. "I don't know what to do with it." "Let it hold," he said. She was quiet for a long while. Then, "Zeke wants to build a chicken coop." Elijah nodded. "There's scrap lumber behind the shed. He can help me cut it in the morning. He's never had a man listen to him like you do. He hasn't had a man stay." Selah turned her head. "You plan to? I already am." She looked at him then, not quick or guarded, but long and steady, as though she were weighing the truth of it against everything she'd known before. "You don't ask for anything back," she said. "I don't need to. I see it already." She pulled her shawl tighter. "What do you see, you?" Elijah said. "All the parts you thought you had to bury to keep going." Her voice dropped. "And if I don't know how to be that anymore, you'll remember, not all at once, but slow. Like the way spring comes here quiet at first, then all at once it's green." The moon climbed higher. Her hands rested in her lap, still and open. "I used to think I was too worn down to start again," she said, "that any soft thing in me had been scraped clean." "You're not worn down," he said. "You're weathered. There's a difference." "How do you know that?" "Because I've seen you fight for everything you touch." She looked down at her palms. "I don't know what to do with someone who doesn't walk away. You don't have to do anything. Just let me stay." Selah's breath caught, but she didn't look away. She reached out then, slow and deliberate, and took the carved loop from his hands. She turned it over once, rubbing her thumb along the grain. "It's not finished," he said. "I don't need it to be," she said. "Not yet." She stood, then bent to kiss his temple, soft and sure. "Come inside when you're ready." Elijah watched her disappear into the glow of the doorway, the wood loop warm in her place. He sat there a while longer, listening to the night breathe around him before he rose and followed her in. The coop went up in 2 days, built from warped planks and leftover nails Elijah had saved in a rusted tin. Zeke hammered with more heart than aim, but Elijah let him drive every nail that would hold. By the time the roof was set, the boy's hands were blistered, but his grin was wide and quiet, like he'd built something that would never fall. Selah stood back with Zadie, watching. She didn't call out instructions or correct Elijah's pace. She only passed a jug of water when the sun reached its peak, and later, after the work was done, she swept the dirt smooth around the new structure, her movements slow and deliberate. That evening, Elijah found her kneading dough at the table. Her sleeves were rolled, the muscles in her arms taut with the rhythm of it. The light from the oil lamp caught on the fine flour dust rising like breath from the bowl. "Zeke wants to keep a rooster," she said without looking up. "Says it'll keep the hens in line." "I'd say he's been watching the wrong animals," Elijah said. Selah's mouth curved, but she said nothing. "What about you?" he asked. "What do you want to keep?" She paused, her hands buried deep in the warm dough. "I haven't wanted much in a long time. That's not what I asked." Selah pulled the dough into a rough ball and placed it under a cloth. She wiped her hands on a rag before answering. "I want quiet mornings," she said. "And something that doesn't break when I lean on it." Elijah stepped forward, slow. "That can be built," she shook her head. "Things people build, they tear down just the same." "Not always," he said. "Some things hold." She turned toward him, her face bare of expression, but her eyes steady. "You didn't grow up on borrowed land. You don't know what it's like to carry everything on your back and still feel like a trespasser." "I've been run off places," Elijah said. "I've been told my hands weren't clean enough, my boots not polished enough, my name not familiar enough. I've slept under more than one sky that didn't want me." Selah folded the rag and set it aside. "But you stayed standing." "Only because no one told me I wasn't allowed to." Silence settled between them, the kind that didn't need breaking. Elijah watched her reach for the lantern's wick, adjusting it with a practiced flick of her fingers. She looked down at her hands. "You think it's foolish, letting children believe this place is theirs?" "No," Elijah said. "I think it's the bravest thing I've seen." The next morning, Selah rose before the sun. She didn't wake the children. She pulled on her boots, laced tight with fraying cord, and stepped outside. The air was cold, the kind that bit through cloth and stung the inside of her nose. Elijah was already at the fence line, checking the post that always leaned in the wind. She walked the length of the field beside him without speaking. When they reached the end, she leaned on the last post, arms folded atop it. "You ever lose something you didn't know you were missing until it showed back up?" she asked. Elijah took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair, and looked out across the land. "Sometimes I think I lost myself somewhere out on the trail. Then I came here and I stopped looking." Selah nodded, her breath visible in the dawn chill. "Maybe I've been looking for so long I forgot what I was after." "You don't have to chase anything here," Elijah said. "You just have to stay." She looked at him, her face unreadable. "You said you'd be the first and the last." "I meant it. And if I say yes, what then?" "Then we make this place ours, not just mine, not just yours, ours." She looked down at her hands, fingers chapped and raw from the cold. "You'd let me shape it?" "I'd be a fool not to." The sun edged over the horizon, lighting the field in bands of gold. Elijah stepped closer, not touching her, just near enough she could feel the warmth of him. Selah lifted her gaze. "Then I say yes." He didn't reach for her, he didn't need to. She stepped toward him and he met her there, the stillness between them deeper than silence. Later, when the children woke to the smell of bread and the sound of laughter outside, they found their mother and Elijah by the coop, shoulder to shoulder, mending a gap in the fence. And in that morning light, nothing looked borrowed. Everything felt like it had always belonged. By early June, the river had swelled with meltwater from the Panhandle's high ground, and the cottonwoods cast full shade along its banks. The days stretched longer, marked by the low drone of insects and the steady rhythm of work. Elijah built a smokehouse beside the shed using flat stones he hauled from the bluff, while Selah tended the kitchen garden they'd carved from the soil behind the house. She planted onions, beans, and squash in straight rows, working with care but without rush, as though she'd finally come to believe there'd be time enough to see them grow. One afternoon, while Zadie napped in the loft and Zeke played near the river with Elijah's old bridle strap, Selah stepped into the barn where Elijah was oiling the harnesses. The air inside was warm and smelled of leather and sun-warmed hay. He glanced up as she approached, her face unreadable but calm. "I sent off a letter," she said. "To a woman I knew in Arkansas. She helped widows find work, sometimes homes too. She used to say grief works best in company." Elijah set the harness down. "You looking for company or looking for closure?" Selah leaned against the stall door. "Neither. I just wanted someone to know I'd landed somewhere, that I don't need a place anymore because I found one." He stood then, brushing off his hands with a rag. "You got kin there?" "No. Just names I used to say out loud." She was quiet a moment. "I'm not going back, Elijah, not ever. I wouldn't ask you to." "I know," she said. "That's why I said it." Elijah crossed to her and held her waist with both hands, not possessive, just present. "If you ever want to send for someone for any reason, I'll ride the miles myself." "There's no one left to send for," she said, her breath catching just slightly. "But thank you." That night the wind shifted. It came in low off the plains, cooler than usual, and carried the faint smell of rain. Selah stood at the open window, watching clouds gather in the distance. Behind her, Elijah sat on the floor beside the children's bedrolls, reading aloud from a battered book of fables he'd traded for in town. Later, when the children were asleep and the lamp burned low, Selah found him on the porch again, barefoot, his elbows resting on his knees. She sat beside him without a word, their shoulders touching. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what it would mean to make this permanent." Elijah didn't move. "Tell me." "I want to marry you, Elijah, not out of need, not because you've been good to the children, but because I want to wake beside you every morning, and I want this life, this house, this land to carry your name and mine, side by side." He turned to her, slow and steady. "You sure?" "I've never been more certain of anything." He reached into his pocket, pulled out something wrapped in cloth. Inside was the ring he'd carved from mesquite, now polished smooth and warm to the touch. "I wasn't waiting for a better time," he said, "just waiting for you to choose it." She let him slide it onto her finger, the wood dark against her skin. It fit without struggle. They were married 3 days later, under the bluff just above the river, with only the children and the wind as witness. Zeke wore a shirt Elijah had stitched from an old grain sack, and Zadie carried a bundle of wildflowers she'd picked without asking. Selah wore her simple cotton dress, and Elijah pressed his lips to her temple when no one was looking. Zeke offered a solemn amen at the end, though no preacher stood between them, only the sky. That night, after the children had fallen asleep in the warmth of the house that now belonged to all of them, Elijah and Selah sat by the hearth. She leaned into him, her body familiar now, not tentative. He traced the lines of her hand with his thumb. "You ever think we'd get here?" he asked. She smiled, slow and full. "I didn't even know this place existed. You feel it now, that it's yours?" "I feel like I built it with you," she said. "That's better." The fire settled low. Elijah rested his cheek against her hair, and she turned toward him, her lips meeting his with intention, no hesitation, no question. Just the quiet certainty of belonging. They lived that way from then on. Not easily, but content. Zeke built a second coop the following spring, and Zadie took to drawing chalk pictures on the barn walls, her laughter ringing clear across the fields. Selah's garden grew full and wild, and Elijah taught her how to smoke meat and mend saddle leather. She showed him how to read the weather and the movement of the birds, how to save seeds for next year, years past. The house aged with them, its timbers swelling and creaking in the heat, its stone walls mossing over in places from the river wind, but it stood, just like them. And no one ever came to take it away.